is it now at the responsibility of the European Union to make sure that those who have trouble are following certain directives?
I think we should be careful not to link things that might be disconnected. So the European Union gave itself certain governing bodies, and I believe as there's nothing else, it's their job to interfere and make sure that the members of the team follow the rules of the game. Now, the way these bodies are being elected and created and who is the decision maker, that's a complete different story. So not necessarily a supervisory body is bad, but maybe the democratic way of how these bodies are being elected needs to be thought over. Yeah, especially in Switzerland, there's still a very strong element of base democracy, where in important subjects, the people are asked directly to vote and express an opinion. Yeah? And that's being done on a constant basis. So if you think about representatives on a European level, even the commissioner, the president, why not asking the people and making it a bit more of a directive democracy?
How can countries and the European Union together avoid these negativity that came along with the last 5 years of, the word of the Troika, the perception that we have seen about, the North and the South, which we've seen in some of the statements, which are, in my opinion, dividing Europe as well as it does the whole discussion about Euro, what you mentioned before, different economic capabilities put into one exchange rate and fixed forever. What can we learn from this time that we now have gone through, and we have heard about the different aspects? What can we learn from it for the other European states, and how should Europe maybe learn from it as an institution?
If you ask me, I think all these safety measures or bailout measures are measures that actually came far too late, because the problem accumulated already from a longer time ago. So being here in a start-up facility with innovative entrepreneurship, strengthening the economic power of a country, making sure that education is being done in a proper manner, that the people can create new businesses and actually help the country to prosper. That avoids falling into a financial crisis when the going gets tough. You've mentioned earlier a rigid, or maybe not rigid, but a conservative financial policy, even in times when times are good, and putting something in the back of your pocket. That prevents you from falling over the knife when the going gets tough.
Yeah, my name is Mark. I'm from the Netherlands and I live in Amsterdam. And I completely agree with what Frank said. I think for me, one of the fundamental things about the European Union, or values, is solidarity. And I think one of the core things that a union should do is, when one of the countries or more are in trouble, they should help each other. And in this case, I think it's therefore good that Portugal was bailed out. But because of that, I think it's also natural that there is some restrictions or some measures put in place for Portugal to get back on track. And also there should be measures when Portugal is back on track put in place to make sure that the same problem is not going to occur again. And for me, those processes should be transparent and should be somewhat democratic. And I got to say, I'm not following the European very closely or putting a lot of effort in getting more informed about this. But from my perspective, as a citizen of the European Union, of Europe, this is not clear. This is not transparent, and I do not feel like I have a say in how these kind of processes are shaped, or who is making the decisions in these processes. So I do not know if in the Portuguese situation, the measures that were put in place for in terms of salary cuts, etc., that we talked about, if they were the good ones or the right ones. I also don't know how these decisions were made, but I would like to know if they were made in the right way, and if they were not made in the right way, if we are learning from them, and if we are avoiding making these mistakes in the future, because I think that's a core thing, of core importance, that we learn from the mistakes in the past.
Actually, that raises an interesting question about the feeling of the Portuguese people, how much they actually had a say in that situation. Looking at you again, sorry, being the Portuguese in the round. I mean, would you, from your perspective, say that the Portuguese felt that they were part of the decision-making process?
I would say no, but there wasn't really a lot of a point in having a say, because the situation was quite dire. It was quite terrible. Like we have a deficit of 11.4% of the GDP. Mostly due to some electoralist measures, some would say. I'd like to just pick a small thing about what Frank said about during good times keeping something in your pocket. That's called counter-cycle fiscal policy. That's something that Europe as a whole should learn, that when times are good, you should use austerity when times are good, so you can save and have money to inject into the economy when they turn bad. And that's one of the reasons why Portugal was so bad, and we had to use austerity in a time that we should have the money to inject into the economy and to have what we're having now, the startups, the productivity rise, etc. One of the things that I also think that is something that we should learn from the problem is that throughout the history of the European Union and the economic collaboration between the countries of Europe is something called a common industrial policy or agricultural policy, which kind of redistributed the production of goods and services, mostly goods, through Europe. And what we saw was that lots of industries in Portugal, like farming, fishing, got relocated to other countries because there was basically more productivity there. It was more efficient to produce those resources there, and with the benefit of the single market, everyone would in theory win, because you would have those goods at a cheaper price and at a cheaper and produced in a bigger quantity. But the thing is, like when times hit you harder, you don't have the inner capacity to compensate for the Portugal basically become mostly services, a tertiary sector country, which was quite terrible, and we became more dependent on the European Union, which shouldn't be the point. The point of the European Union should not be like a central entity where all the states are dependent on it, but more a platform for collaboration and voluntary collaboration. So a place where Portugal can go and meet the Netherlands and say, okay, maybe we should have an agreement that goes further than what the European Union says, and we should be free to do that. And the same, I can also go to Romania and say, okay, like with this trade deal is not benefiting us, so we'd like to roll back on some of its features. So I think that's one of the lessons. The European Union should be more a voluntary platform and not like a coercive institution, in some sense.
So that means that the states should have more opportunity to choose what they want to get from the European Union and what not.
Yes.
So they can also say, I want this, but I don't want that.
Yes, but also, I forgot to say that, I thought about it earlier, so it's a very short comment. But the states themselves should also ask their populations what they want. When Portugal got into the euro, there was no referendum, and the currency is an element of a sovereignty of a nation. So the states themselves should ask the country when they then vote and then take decisions with the European institutions.
Let me ask you one quick question. What would you think would be the decision today if Portugal government would ask the Portuguese people if they would like to join the European Union with the experience now of the last years in mind?
So
what do you think? What is the sentiment?
No, I think we would still want in. I mean, if I would have decided at the time maybe about the euro, I'm not sure we would have said yes, because I mean, at least if we knew the consequence, because from overnight we lost not half but a huge amount of our purchasing power when we changed from our own currency to the euro, because it was a very unfavorable exchange rate. So at the time it was not, in my opinion, not a good decision. But changing now to, for example, to a different national currency would be devastating, I think. But still, the public sentiment is to stay in the European Union, and it would be quite a bit hypocritical to say no, because Europe, if we put it in numbers, the balance is quite positive for us. Okay. I mean, you see in many regional and local buildings like schools and bridges, you see the billboards supported by the European Union, and that's really important for us. So there was a lot of development funds which were really important to ramp up our economy, which was a bit underdeveloped before the revolution.
Okay, that's good to know.